What about that? Named after tariff, right? And what happened is the Moors imposed a special tax at that port, and that's the origin of the word tariff. Right? Did we know this? Aren't you glad you're here? All right, so in 711, Musa sent a second and more formidable African army into Spain, led by Tariq ibn Ziyad. Tariq ibn Ziyad was an African, and he led an expeditionary force of 6,700 African soldiers, 300 Arab translators and propagandists, and they occupied a portion of Spain, and then they renamed that part that they occupied the Rock of Tariq, Jebel Tariq, Gibraltar. We understanding this? Yeah? So that too is named after an African. Yeah? Okay, now European writer from the time period. There's a European monk, and this is what he said happened. The reins of their horses were as fire, their faces black as pitch. Their eyes shone like burning candles. Their horses were swift as leopards, and the riders fiercer than a wolf in a sheepfold at night. The noble Goths were broken in an hour, quicker than tongue can tell. O luckless Spain. Now, can you see that there's a description of the Moors that you don't often see? Faces black as pitch. So that tells us that dark-skinned Moors were the majority, but the light-skinned ones were also there. All right? Okay, the early years. The early years of Islamic rule in Spain were unstable. There were 19 governors over Cordoba between 716 and 747. When you have a large number of rulers in a short period of time, that's political instability. Right? Actually, I did not want to mention Kwesi, but yeah, there it is. All right, so what happened next? Well, the Muslims took control of land vacated by the Spaniards, who fled north. Arabs settled the most fertile part of the south and left Africans poorer land in central Spain and areas closer to the north. And this led to conflict between Musa, the Arab overlord, but let's be quite clear, Yemeni overlord, and Tariq, the African subordinate. An African and Arab conflict would escalate and even blowing up into civil war. So they had to find a ruler who could unite both. And this ruler was Abd al-Rahman I. He's said to have been part Arab, i.e. Yemeni, and part African. So he would have been fully black, in other words. Right? In May 756, he became the ruler of Islamic Spain and the first of the Umayyads. He divided the country into military districts and administered it on that basis, and he created a standing army of 40,000 men who were mostly Africans. In agriculture, he made developments that led to the growth of the farming industry. He introduced accurate land surveying, built granaries to combat food shortages, and established effective irrigation canals. From the Middle East, he imported cotton, fruits, rice, spices, sugarcane, and vegetables. And so the industries that developed from Abd al-Rahman's policies were sugarcane and cotton were planted near the Mediterranean coastal regions. Figs and olives were farmed in the south. Oranges and wine were cultivated in Granada and Malaga provinces. Oranges, rice, and palm trees sprouted in Valencia. A silk industry grew up in Murcia. Leatherworking and dyeing flourished in Cordoba. Ordnance developed in Toledo, and ceramics industry prospered in Almeria. Now, this is what the Science Museum in Granada has to say. We've got here hydraulic technology. Great advances were made in hydraulic technology in El Andalus, Andalusia, Spain. The traditions of classical engineering were combined with new ideas emanating from the Islamic world from two principal sources, Syria and North Africa. The Eastern writer, El Yaziri, was a leading proponent of these ideas. So, new ideas, what dates, please? What dates? 12th and 13th centuries. Does that make sense? And when this happened, this was new. Are we getting this? And then they have an example of a water wheel, and then they have the animal-powered water lifting device. Can you see that? Yeah? Now, medieval Nubia had sakias. Can you see that that's sakia? is the same as that. Does that make sense? All they did was they changed the four-legged beastie in the picture. Yes? And then we read Ibn Hawqal writing in 951 AD. What date, please? 951 AD. The most prosperous part of the country, Nubia, is the territory of Alwa, which has a continuous chain of villages and a continuous strip of cultivated land, so that a traveller may in one day pass through many villages, one joining the next, supplied with waters drawn from the Nile by means of sakias. 951 AD's 10th century. So why did the Granada Museum say the 12th and 13th century stuff was new? Why did they say that? Well, let's look again. We read about the new stuff, and we read that it was an Eastern writer called El-Yazari. Do you see? So they wanted to credit him. Now, why did they want to credit him? One wonders why they'd want to credit him. All right, now keeping it moving. How do we know the culture was mostly African? Well, when you read the descriptions of the early sultans of Spain, some of them are described as blonde, white, copper-colored, brown, reddish, dark, frizzly-haired, woolly-haired, etc. Well, they don't sound like Africans, so what's going on? Answer, huge amounts of intermarriage. Yeah? But so how do we know the culture was African? Well, in 1992, the Journal of Human Biology carried an article called Importation Route of the Sickle Cell Trait into Portugal, Contribution of Molecular Epidemiology. Let's read it. To elucidate the origin and spread of the sickle cell trait into the Portuguese population, we examined 9 polymorphic DNA markers within the beta-globin gene cluster defining the haplotype. The population sample included 64 sickle cell gene-bearing individuals from defined Portuguese-speaking white, black, and Asian Indian populations. The nature and geographic distribution of the different beta-S haplotypes in Portugal suggests that the sickle cell trait has been imported twice. How many times, please? Twice. Okay, so we're interested in the first one, aren't we? Between the 8th and 13th centuries from the Mediterranean basin in association with the Benin haplotype, and after the 15th century from Black Africa over an Atlantic route, Senegal and Bantu haplotypes. Okay, 8th to 13th century, that's 700 AD to 1200 AD. Isn't that the period we're talking about? And what type of sickle cell is it, folks? The Benin haplotype. Did we know this? Did we know this? So therefore we can infer that the culture indeed was mostly African. Now what does the term Moor mean? It was a geographical term of Phoenician origin, and it originally meant Western. The Phoenicians applied the term to the people of Northwest Africa. Another theory claims that the word Moor is derived from a Kushite capital city called Meroe. Now the Greeks and Romans adopted the term Mori, but also described these same Northwest Africans as Nigri, black, and Adusti, scorched. The Latin word Morus became a synonym with another Latin word, Niger, which means black. In other European languages, the association of the term Moor with Negroes continued well into the Renaissance period, as you know, because Shakespeare did that, right? Now, example, did you know that there was a Catholic saint called Saint Benedict the Moor? And then we read on the Catholic website, Benedict the Moor was born a slave near Messina, Italy. We read on, read on, read on.